Hare Krishna. Thank you everyone for attending this morning's Srimad Bhagavatam class. Everyone on Mayapur TV and the temple. So this morning we read from Canto 2, Chapter 9, verse number 39. The chapter is titled Answers by Citing the Lord's Version. Before we chant, we recite the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, verse number 39, which is on the board. Antarhitendriyarthaya Haraye Vihitanjali Sarvabhutamayo Vishvam Sasajedam Sapurvava Antarhitendriyarthaya Haraye Vihitanjali Sarvabhutamayo Vishvam Sasajedam Sapurvavat Antarhitendriyarthaya Haraye Vihitanjali Sarvabhutamayo Vishvam Sasajedam Sapurvavat. Antarhitendriyarthaya Haraye Vihitanjali Sarvabhutamayo Vishvam Sasajedam Sapurvavat. Word for word translation. Antarhita, on the disappearance. Indriyarthaya, unto the personality of Godhead, the objective of all senses. Haraye, unto the Lord. Vihita Anjali, in folded hands. Sarvabhuta, all living entities. Maya, full of. Vishvam, the universe. Sasarjaha, created. Idam, this. Sa, he, Brahmaji. Purvavat, exactly like before. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. On the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who is the object of transcendental enjoyment for the senses of devotees, Brahma, with folded hands, began to recreate the universe, full with living entities, as it was previously. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, is the object for fulfilling the senses of all living entities. Illusioned by the glaring reflection of the external energy, the living entities worship the senses instead of engaging them properly in fulfilling the desires of the Supreme. In the Hari Bhakti Sudodaya 13.2, there is the following verse. Akshno phalam tvadarshya darshanam hi tano phalam tvadarshya gatra sangaha Jiva phalam tvadarshya kirtanam hi sudurlabha bhagavata hi loke. O devotee of the Lord, the purpose of the visual sense is fulfilled simply by seeing you, and to touch your body is the fulfillment of bodily touch. The tongue is meant for glorifying your qualities, because in this world, a pure devotee of the Lord is very difficult to find. Originally, the senses of the living entity were awarded for this purpose, namely, to engage them in the transcendental loving service of the Lord or that of His devotees. But the conditioned souls, illusioned by the material energy, became captivated by sense enjoyment. Therefore, the whole process of God consciousness is meant to rectify the conditional activities of the senses and to re-engage them in the direct service of the Lord. Lord Brahma thus engaged his senses in the Lord by recreating the conditioned living entities to act in the recreated universe. This material universe is thus created and annihilated by the will of the Lord. It is created to give the conditioned soul a chance to act, to return home, back to Godhead, and servants like Brahmaji, Naradji, Vyasji, and their company become busy with the same purpose of the Lord, to reclaim the conditioned souls from the field of sense gratification and return them to the normal stage of engaging the senses in the service of the Lord. Instead of doing so, that is, converting the actions of the senses, the impersonalists began to make the conditioned soul senseless, and the Lord also senseless. That is improper treatment for the conditioned souls. The disease condition of the senses may be treated by curing the defect, but not uprooting the senses altogether. When there is some disease in the eyes may be cured to see properly. Plucking out the eyes is no treatment. Similarly, the whole material disease is based on the process of sense gratification. And liberation from the diseased condition is re-engagement of the senses to see the beauty of the Lord, hear His glories, and act on His account. Thus, Brahmaji created the universal activities again. Om Gyantimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadandikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Vajatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So read the translation again. On the disappearance of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who is the object of transcendental enjoyment for the senses of devotees, Brahma, with folded hands began to recreate the universe full with living entities as it was previously. As I was reading this and I was reflecting, what a thankless task does Lord Brahma have? If I was told, okay, I create this building, and then tomorrow someone comes and dismantles the building, and then I've been asked, come and reassemble it again, And this happens for eternity, I mean, for a long time, not eternity. Well, for a long time that almost sounds like eternity, because Lord Brahma lives for a considerably long period of time. How disgruntled would I feel? Just doing the same thing over and over again. But here you see Brahma is doing this as a service to the Lord, and many others, and their service is not, their prime objective is not to create this world for any other reason, but to reclaim, to help the Lord, to assist the Lord in reclaiming the conditioned souls back home, back to Godhead. So recently I believe I'd recently heard, I think Grace Mathura Gokul Mataji was reciting or was speaking on the Hamsa Guhya prayers in the evening. Maybe that was last week, I can't remember, and that prompted me to go back and read the Hamsa Guhya prayers, which were chanted by Prajapati Daksha, when he was asked to again fill this universe with living entities. So in that there's a term that was described in the purport. It's actually, if you read 6th canto, chapter 4, which is the Hamsa Guhya prayers, and verse number 28. And in that Prabhupada describes that, he describes a word called tapakari. And he said, in the material world, the spiritual happiness or the spiritual energy is actually manifested as tapakari, that which causes miseries. Everyone is hankering for happiness, and that hankering for happiness, or that element of happiness, obviously comes from the all-blissful Supreme Personality of Godhead. But because this material world is not a permanent place, any attempts here to experience that happiness will cause miseries. For example, and it's all, we don't really have to dive deep into this subject, but if we just look at it from a very, just analyze ourselves. For example, this one finger, or or let's say, for example, if we just take our finger, it can give us, if you just think of ways, the number of ways that it can give us happiness, it's fairly limited. But if you think of number of ways it can cause us distress, the list is endless. So in that way we see in this material world, whatever situation we try to create for the sense of our happiness will be short-lived. And someone who wants to be the CEO of a company, they'll endeavor so hard to become the CEO of a company, but guess what? When they become the CEO of a company, they have sleepless nights because they have to deal with so many aspects. They have to deal with the shareholders who have invested in the company, and he or she is having to be in constant anxiety. What happens if the share price falls? What happens if my if the earnings of my company, if there's some, if my company is attacked by a lawsuit, for some trivial reasons that I don't even know of. So just getting that position of a CEO, it actually comes with a package of anxieties. So we always are wanting that anxiety, we can't run away from these anxieties. But at the same time, if we direct our endeavor for happiness in service to the Supreme Lord, then that tapakari, that which causes miseries, is vanquished. I mean, we face anxieties in devotional service, but that anxiety gives us bliss, as opposed to giving us anxiety in this material world. So I thought that was quite apt, and actually Daksha is in that Hamsa Guhya prayers, in that context. He's been asked to recreate, or he's been asked to fill this universe with progeny that will further, the Lord's cause. But as he sees there's some discrepancy in what's been happening, so he performs tapasya to please the Lord, and the Lord is pleased with his prayers. He chants some beautiful prayers, and as he chants those prayers, the Lord appears and is pleased by his attempt by his austerities and his devotional service. And he offers him a benediction, and he says this is what he gives him instructions on what to do. And again, like you find here, the Lord just disappears. Like has happened here. In the previous verse, I think Toshan Krishna Prabhu spoke yesterday, where it said in verse number 38, Sukadeva Goswami said, to Maharaj Parikshit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, after being seen in his transcendental form, instructing Brahmaji, the leader of the living entities, disappeared. So the Lord comes, he gives his instructions and disappears. So now what I wanted to speak about in this context of this verse is we see Lord Brahma, starting to recreate the universe. And if we just go back not too far, but to chapter 5 of this canto, where this is being described, I just want to relay a couple of verses. So if we go to chapter 5, and we just go to verse number 5. So this is Narada Muni asking Lord Brahma. So Narada Muni is inquiring from Brahma. Text number 4 actually. My dear Father, what is the source of your knowledge? Under whose protection are you standing? And under whom are you working? What is your real position? Do you alone create all entities with material elements by your personal energy? And then he goes on to say in text number 5, as a spider very easily creates the network of its cobweb and manifests the power of creation without being defeated by others, so also you yourself, by employment of your self-sufficient energy, create without any other's help. And then I'll just move on to verse number 7. Yet we are moved to wonder about the existence of someone more powerful than you when we think of your great austerities in perfect discipline, although your good self is so powerful in the matter of creation. So we see here in that chapter 5, Lord Brahma being seen upon as the primary creator, because Narada Muni sees no one else other than Brahma creating the universe. So similarly, even for us, like I was saying last week, I was hearing this class by Devamrita Swami, that even though Krishna exists inside and outside of everything, yet we don't see him, and that's such a mystery. And why is that so? Because again, Krishna chooses whom to reveal himself to, but he gives us the process by which we can see him. That is through the eyes of the Shastra, to the eyes, to the words of the Acharyas, and by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. So, and we later on see, which I will discuss in a bit, is what in text 10, Brahma says, whatever you have spoken about me is not false, because unless and until one is aware of the personality of Godhead, who is the ultimate truth beyond me, one is sure to be illusioned by observing my powerful activities. So, I think a few weeks ago, the brahmacharis were in Dabo, and they came across this gentleman, and because they were traveling around, they just passed over his details to me and asked me to keep in touch. So I spoke to this really, very well-spoken gentleman, and he straight away cut to the point. I thought, maybe this will be like a structured thing where he wants to ask some question from the Gita. I'll have to just research and say. And he said, I know what you guys are all about. No, he didn't. He said it. I know. Everything. I have the Hare Krishna mantra. I have the books, but I'm actually confused, and I am finding the answer to my question for a long, long time. And I asked him, "What's your question?" He said, "How can I be convinced that God is a person?" And when he asked that question, I thought there's something so trivial. I mean, how can you not be convinced that God is a person? So as I was trying to explain to him or trying to share with him what I knew, and I could see he was struggling. He was really struggling to grasp this very idea that God is a person. And that's something that for us as devotees, it is ingrained in us, or it's a simple and deep philosophical point, but it is held. So we are convinced that Krishna is Sarva Karana Karanam. He's the cause of all causes, and he's the ultimate truth. He's the absolute truth, and obviously we are convinced because we are following in the footsteps of our teachers and Srila Prabhupada, who is presenting this philosophy to us, presenting this very foundational principle. And you repeatedly see this in the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, where it establishes Krishna as a person. But yet, when I was speaking to him, he was struggling. And I thought that, is this due to maybe, he's just... And he was sincerely trying to make an attempt to understand. Can you convince me that... how can I be convinced that God is a person? Do I just accept everything that you're saying at face value? Or can I really understand? And I was trying to tell to him that you have to start practicing, take to the practice of bhakti, you chant, all that I was telling him, but he wasn't just getting it. And just yesterday, I had the good fortune of hearing a class by His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu, who spoke on this very same topic, and I'd like to share what I had heard from him. And he was saying this, we see the cause and the effect. For us, we understand Krishna is the cause, and the effect is this world, which is also in one sense non-different from him, because it's maintained by his energies. So he was saying there was this Scottish philosopher called David Hume. David. And he questioned the relationship between cause and effect. And let's try to understand this. What he said is, for example, let's say if I have an apple and I just release the apple, what will happen is that it'll fall to the ground, right? If I do that 100 times, and in each occurrence I'm seeing it falls to the ground, And after that 100 times, or whatever times that you may say, it becomes a law. It's called the law of gravity. That whatever you drop, it gravitates towards the earth. But David Hume has an interesting question. He said, or he was trying to understand. Okay, cause me dropping the apple, and effect, apple dropping to the ground. Right? That's who we say. But he said, other than this, what is the guarantee that the next time I drop an apple, that it'll fall to the ground? Even after 1,000,000 attempts, what if on the 1,000,001 first attempt, it won't? What's the guarantee? Right? What's the guarantee that it'll fall? And he also asked another question. And for example, every morning we wake up, and the sun rises at that time that it's supposed to rise. Obviously, there's a bit of a variation depending on meteorological calculation, but the sun rises. So he would say, what is the guarantee that tomorrow the sun will rise? How can you be convinced of that fact that tomorrow the sun will rise? And actually, Radhika Raman Prabhu was saying that when he was studying philosophy at the university, there was a philosophy club that was following the teachings of David Hume. And every year, on the day of his birthday, every night they'd have a party where they would drink through the night, and they'd be waiting for the sun to rise just to see that is it coming true or not. So the relationship between cause and effect, that's how do you bind it? How do you what makes it come together? That's what he was trying to understand. So in other words, who is that, there needs to be a guarantor that will guarantee the intrinsic relationship between cause and effect. Well, for us, as devotees, as we are convinced of it, it is the Purusha avatars. It is the Lord himself that actually combine the cause and effect. And we'll get into this in a bit. As Srila Prabhupada would always say that the cause is within the effect. For example, you can see the material world within the Lord, as we would see in the Yashoda, in the pastime of baby Krishna, where Mother Yashoda looks into his mouth and she sees all these universes floating. And she sees herself within that universe. And at the same time, the Lord can be seen in the material world, chapter 11 of the Bhagavad Gita, how to perceive divinity in matter. So for example, if you say that cause and effect are disjointed, let's say for instance, then how do you explain this world? Then the only way you can explain this world is that something has just sprung up on its own. And that we don't see, right? We don't see this beautiful building come up on its own. There has been a cause to it. That means someone has worked, has labored, to get, to build this material, so build this building. So there has to be a cause. So if you question cause and effect, then the opposite of it, or the counter argument is that the effects have spontaneously generated. That means the effect of this building has spontaneously come about, which again has been refuted by our Vaishnava acharyas, and it doesn't make sense. So now what do you do? So there are various philosophies that speak about creation, and it speaks about that, okay, we say the Lord created this material world. And then some say, like for example, if you read in the Canto 2, chapter 5, verse 11, Prabhupada says we should not consider the Lord to be like a blacksmith who's creating the world with a hammer and different things. So someone will say, okay, the Lord created this world, and He created the world with these ingredients, or the stuff that makes up this world. If you go with that philosophy, then there is a contradiction. That means there is the Lord, and then there is the stuff that makes this world. That means there are two things. So both of them have existed along the lines. So when you say that there are two things, there's the Lord and the stuff of this world, then you're actually speaking of two tattvas, or two truths that bring about this creation, that means that there's a competition between the two. What existed, the Lord or the stuff? And as we understand, we just finished reading Chatur Shloke, the Bhagavatam, Aham evasam evagre. In the beginning, I alone existed. So I alone, meaning that the Lord existed. There's no stuff. So okay, so that argument is left to the side. Then the other argument would be that the Lord creates this world out of His own body, like out of stuff that's created from His own body. Now that would seem to work, but that would mean that the Lord's body is going through some self-modification, some changes. That means if I'm creating off my body, that means there's some changes that are happening. Now we see in this world that our bodies are constantly changing, right? I mean, we take birth, we grow, we produce byproducts, we generate offspring, our body dwindles, it decays, and ultimately gone. So that would mean that, are we saying that the Lord's body that's going through self-modification or through changes is the same as us? No. That doesn't make sense either. What the Bhagavatam says, and what Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas speak so elaborately in the Bhagavatam, is that this world is created by the Lord's energy. Shakti Parinam Vada. He has energies that eternally emanate from Him. For example, the sun, and Prabhupada always gives the example of the sun. The sun is always emanating sunshine. It's not that the sun comes up and says, oh, today for the first 3 hours I won't emanate sunshine. I'll wait for 3 hours and then boom, there's sunshine. It's not. Sun and sunshine always existing. So the Lord's energies are always eternally existing, and the Lord creates this world through His energies. The Lord's energies are never produced at a certain time. And everything is an emanation. Everything is a transformation of the sun's energy. In fact, it's the sun's energy that we are dependent upon. The sun's energy creates the cloud, creates rainfall, the rainfall falls on earth, which then nourishes the vegetation, which we then consume, and that's what the sun is, a source of energy for our sustenance. And where does the sun shine emanate from? It's the Brahma Jyoti. If we read, again I'll go back to the 11th verse of the 5th chapter. In which the Lord Brahma says, I create after the Lord's creation by his personal effulgence known as the Brahma Jyoti. Just as when the sun manifests its fire, the moon, the firmament, the influential planets and the twinkling stars also manifest their brightness. So now, interestingly, there's another analogy that's given in the Bhagavatam, is of the spider and its cobweb. That how the spider creates its own cobweb. So in one sense, the spider is in the Adi Leela of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, we see this very detailed explanation of the efficient cause and the substantive cause, or what you would say the immediate cause. So the spider is the efficient cause. And how does the spider create the web? Through the excretion of its own saliva. So that is the substance, the substantive cause. And again, when the spider wants to wrap up the web, he will do so. So the spider is the efficient cause because it's coming from him. Through the excretion of its own saliva, it creates the cobweb. And believe it or not, but the cobweb exists for the spider's pleasure. So similarly, this world, it's created by the Lord, the material or the elements also provided by the Lord, and it exists for the Lord's pleasure. It's for His Leela. His Leela in the sense that, as we see here, it's created with a purpose in mind, which is to reclaim the conditioned souls back home, back to God. So the Lord is both. He's the maker of this world. He creates this world, and He also provides the substance. So, okay, that's fine. We understand that the Lord is the cause and effect of this world. He creates this world and He sets it into motion. But how does cause and effect work in our life? How do I understand that? Because it is said that we are completely spiritual. We have nothing to do with matter. We exist beyond, our spiritual existence is beyond matter. So how does that connection happen between, cause and effect? We desire this world, and then in the chapter 15 of the Bhagavad Gita, it says the living entities are trying to manipulate, this material energy. So how is it that we, who are completely spiritual, make that connection with matter? Because we are totally opposite. We exist in two different realms. So then one would ask the question, the perennial question that keeps coming up and time again, how do we get conditioned? And again, Sankhya philosophy speaks about it, Canto 3 of the Bhagavatam. How is something that's spiritual makes that connection with matter? And then when you start to dissect, okay, what is a body made up of? Body, like as we see, is made up of 5 elements. Then that's gross. Then you come up from gross to subtle. Then you see there's this mind, the ego, and then you see there's buddhi, intelligence. Now, okay, one may see that the buddhi, the intellect, is what allows us to perceive this world. How do we perceive? Because we are actually spiritual. How do we perceive matter, which is total opposite? So buddhi is the connection, or that which allows us to perceive this world. And Radhika Raman Prabhu was giving an interesting example which I didn't know of, and he was saying that eyesight, so some people who have been blind, and by some medical technology, because they were born blind due to some defect. But due to technology, they have had their eyesight restored. And as soon as the eyesight is restored, for if not days or weeks, for example, if I come here and I see this wall, I'm seeing a wall. I'm seeing paintings. I'm seeing whatever I'm seeing. But if a person whose eyesight has been restored, all they see is just blobs of light. They can't perceive what we are perceiving. So what allows us to perceive what they can't perceive is the function of the intellect. The intellect is what allowing us to perceive things, is interpreting this is what it is. It's a table. This is a wall. These are paintings. So the intellect is what gives us that sense of discrimination. So now again the question comes, but that's still what we say intellect is, as we understand in Sankhya, is still matter. How do we make that jump from matter to transcendence? And that's what philosopher David Hume, and even, like I said, my friend, or not my friend, but anyway, this person that I was speaking to, was struggling with. How do you connect that matter? What will give you that leap from matter transcendence? And we understand in the Bhagavatam and in the Bhagavad Gita, it's the super soul. That's the ultimate perceiver of everything that there is. The super soul makes that connection, helps us make that connection. And as we read and again, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna, "O Arjuna, you are aware of your kshetra, your place, but I am the perceiver of all kshetras. I know everything. We are cognizant of what's happening in our body, but Krishna is perceiving all, is able to perceive and experience what's happening in everyone's body, in everyone's experience." So we read in the fifth canto. We read in the 5th chapter, the Virat Rupa, that how our eyesight or our power of seeing is dependent on the Lord's seeing. So when in the Virat Rupa you see the sun and moon are the eyes through which the Lord sees the world, but that is the primary seer. We are dependent on that aspect. We are dependent on the eyesight of the Virat Rupa for us to even say, if the Lord, as soon as the Lord's, it says in succession as the first, the sun and the moon, the eyes of the Lord, they come into effect, that allows us to see. And every experience that we have, because His senses allow for our senses to perceive the world. And if you really go and analyze this deeply, on a cosmic level, it is Mahavishnu lying on the Karana ocean. What is Karana? Causal waters. He's lying on the causal waters. On the cosmic level, it is Karana Dakshaya Vishnu who's binding cause and effect. Because again, cause is the Lord and effect is the material world. Matter doesn't come up on its own. Matter comes from, spirit is what activates matter in that sense. So the Lord, on the cosmic level, Karana Dakshaya Vishnu, binds the cause and effect. And when each universe comes into existence, then again, Garbha Dakshaya Vishnu comes into this universe, lies on the waters of this planet. He fills up half of the universe with his water. And he makes that connection between that cause and effect. And on an individual level, it's Kshirodakashaya Vishnu who's laying as a super soul in our heart who makes that connection between cause and effect. What allows us to experience matter. So Krishna is the overseer. It is described in the 2nd chapter. And his overseeing is not like just, someone just sitting there and just done like that and just overseeing. Okay. You're doing this. Okay. By Krishna's overseeing, he's making our perception possible. Not that he's taking away our free will, but he's facilitating our desires. In a sense that what we want to do, he's facilitating that. And obviously there are personalities like Lord Brahma and Narada Muni who are actually doing this as a service to the Lord by trying to engage everyone in the devotional service of the Lord. So, again, as a final concluding line, it is Krishna who allows this causation to happen. And as we see in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi Leela, if we get a chance, this has been explained. Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami goes into the depths of understanding this very foundational principle, which, you'll see the various other philosophies around the world are, what they agree is that, okay, the Lord is the creator of this world, but when you say He is the creator, but then everything comes from Him, and He's also the maker of this world. He's both the efficient and the immediate cause of the world. You'll find major philosophies around this world don't agree to this principle, except for if you read in the Adi Leela, the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So now Lord Brahma is starting to recreate, and then we'll again see him having or Narada Muni, for that matter, inquiring again from Brahma of what's actually happened. So this is continuing on from, I would say, chapter 5 of the second canto. Okay, I'll stop here. If anyone has any questions or comments. Yeah. Yes. Because he felt like there's pus that's oozing from his body, and then he didn't want to embrace the Lord. The Lord was rushing to embrace him, and he said, "Why are you doing so?" Is that what happened? Yeah, this akshno phalam padrisha darshanam hi tano phalam padrisha gatra sangaha jiva phalam padrisha ketanam hi sudur labha bhagavata hi loke. O devotee of the Lord, the purpose of the visual sense is fulfilled simply by seeing you, and to touch your body is the fulfillment of bodily touch. The tongue is meant for glorifying your qualities, because in this world a pure devotee of the Lord is very difficult to find. Wow. Jai. Thank you, Prabhu. Right. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Jai.